All right, welcome to lesson 3 for unit 1. Lesson 3 is all about aquatic biomes. This is going to be split into two parts because it is quite a bit. So part 1 is going to be an introduction to aquatic biomes and then covering marine ecosystem, so like ocean. And then part 2 is going to focus on freshwater ecosystems, so what we would have near us inland. So learning objective for this one is that you'll be able to describe the different types of marine ecosystems as well as the divisions of the ocean. There's quite a few new terms that you may not have heard before in this lesson and in the next because we have to be able to differentiate what part of that biome that we're going to be talking about. So aquatic ecosystems are shaped by key environmental factors. Just like terrestrial biomes, it was temperature and then precipitation pattern. Aquatic ecosystems are also shaped by specific ones. So one is the ability of sun's rays to penetrate the water because that's going to influence what kind of plants can live there. The depth of the water, the nature of the bottom substrate, the water temperature, the amount of dissolved salt, and the amount of dissolved salts. So aquatic ecosystems with little dissolved salt are called freshwater ecosystems, and marine ecosystems have a high dissolved salt content. So this lesson is going to focus on, or this part is going to focus on those marine ecosystems. So starting with those new regions, you may not have heard these terms before, and that is okay. The pelagic region is the open sea above the sea floor. The euphotic zone is the upper layer of the ocean where the sun's rays penetrate. Photic means light. So a photo, it's made from light. So the photic zone, the euphotic zone is the upper layer where the sun's rays can penetrate. There are two different types of plankton and you need to be able to differentiate them. The first type is phytoplankton. So phyto, it's just like photo, it's light. So light plankton, they're microscopic plants floating in the ocean. They perform photosynthesis. Photo, light, photosynthesis, they're plants. Zooplankton, like zooplankton. What do you go to the zoo to see? You go to the zoo to see animals. So these are like animal plankton. So they're microscopic protozoa and animals that feed on phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are going to be the base of that food chain, and then the zooplankton are eating the phytoplankton. So productive aquatic ecosystems contain a plentiful supply of essential nutrients. And this is one of those zones. So we have the tidal zone over here. We have the euphotic zone. This is as deep as the sunlight can reach. We have zooplankton, phytoplankton, seaweed. This is a pelagic zone, so like open ocean. And then the benthic zone is going to be that where we actually have like a bottom. So for benthic marine ecosystems, so down at the bottom, so benthic organisms are attached or non-attached and they live on the ocean bottom. Substrate and temperature are very important characteristics in determining benthic community development. And an abyssal ecosystem, think about the abyss, is a benthic ecosystem that occurs at great depths in the ocean. So we go back to that. That's this right here. So that's where you have like the really gnarly looking football fish with the lights and everything. That is the abyssal ecosystem. There is no light to support photosynthesis, so there is no plants there. And so those animals are scavengers. Many are small and generate light for finding or attracting food. They get a lot of the dead things floating down there. All right, so here's just another one. So photic zone where we get light. Pelagic zone is going to be that open ocean. Benthic, and then abyssal way down in the deep. So substrate is important in determining the kinds of benthic community that develops. Large plants and algae cannot become established in shifting sand substrate. They need something a little more stable. Mud usually contains little oxygen, but it's a good substrate for some kinds of rooted plants because it's going to be more stable than that sand that's shifting around. Rocky surfaces in the ocean provide a good substrate for many kinds of algae. They just need that flat surface. And a profuse growth of algae is associated with a large variety of animals. So if we have a lot of algae there, that means we probably have a lot of other animals there that are able to feed on that algae. We also have different types of shores. So right here is a rocky shore. This is what we might see there. So we notice with a rocky shore versus a sandy shore, it's a lot more taken up with plants growing because it's easier to get a foothold there. It's not shifting around so much. Whereas with a sandy shore, it's going to shift around a lot. So we're going to have less plants within that tidal zone where the water is coming up. Most of those plants are going to be really high up. So coral reef ecosystems they're talked about a lot when we talk about environmental science because they are so at risk with climate change, but they are composed primarily of coral animals that build cup-shaped external skeletons. Corals contain single-celled algae and carry on photosynthesis. They require warm water, and so they're found more near the equator. We don't have a lot of coral reef ecosystems very far from the equator. They require clear, shallow water with lots of sunlight penetration. And this is what they look like. They are gorgeous, and they're found all along these red dots right here. They are very, very productive ecosystems. All right, the next we're going to talk about is a mangrove swamp ecosystem. They are tropical forest ecosystems that occupy shallow water near the shore and adjacent land. Their trees tolerate high salt content and extract salt from their leaves. And they have extensively developed roots that can extend above the water. The trees trap sediment in shallow areas, which results in the development of terrestrial ecosystems. So just they go through a thing called succession, which we will talk about, where we're kind of slowly going from an aquatic ecosystem, and then eventually it will become terrestrial as more and more of that sediment builds up. And this is what a mangrove swamp looks like. So it has really interesting roots and limbs that climb above the water. All right, and then estuaries consist of shallow, partially enclosed areas where freshwater enters an ocean. So it's still considered a marine ecosystem because we have enough salt there, but it is freshwater into marine. Organisms are specially adapted to varying levels of salinity from tides and river flow. And estuaries are extremely productive ecosystems because they're warm, shallow, and nutrient-rich. So we have the warm temperature for a lot of photosynthesis to happen, shallow so we get a lot of sunlight for photosynthesis, and we have nutrients for plants and animals to thrive. These areas are important nursery sites for fish and crustaceans, and they look like this. So here's ocean, and then this over here is that estuary. So for human impact, oceans cover about 70% of the Earth's surface, and overfishing has destroyed many of the traditional fishing industries of the world. Fish farming results in the addition of nutrients and has caused disease to spread from farm fish to wild fish. So the thought is, if we're overfishing the ocean, let's do like we do with terrestrial animals and farm them. But fish farming is not the perfect solution because it does also pollute our natural waters. And estuaries are affected by fertilizers, animal waste, and pesticides that flow down rivers from farmland. And that's going to affect where estuaries are super, super important for fish to be able to reproduce and thrive. So if we are affecting those with all of these chemicals, then we're going to affect the marine life as well. And the use of oceans as transportation results in oil pollution and trash floating onto the shore. All right, that is the end of this lesson. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one. Remember, this lesson is 2 parts. So we just talked about marine ecosystems, and you'll talk about freshwater ecosystems next.